Caught my wife cheating with my best friend. Then her sister helped me rebuild my life. Hey Reddit, throwaway account for obvious reasons. I never thought I'd be posting here, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. This story spans about 3 years of my life, and honestly, writing it all out is therapeutic in a way I didn't expect. I'm Jacob, 38, and my ex-wife Lena is 36. We were married for 12 years and have twin boys, Jake and Tommy, who are 11 now. I work as a financial advisor at a mid-sized firm called Peterson & Associates, where I've been for 7 years. Lena was a marketing director at a tech startup called Innovate Tech Solutions. We lived what I thought was a pretty decent suburban life in Colorado Springs, 4-bedroom house in a good neighborhood, excellent schools for the kids, annual family vacations to places like Yellowstone and the Grand Canyon. Looking back, I realize I was living in a complete bubble of denial. Lena had always been ambitious and driven, which I genuinely admired about her when we first met in college. She was the type of person who set goals and achieved them through sheer determination and intelligence. She climbed the corporate ladder fast and made excellent money, actually more than I did by the time our marriage started falling apart. I supported her career moves enthusiastically, even when it meant relocating twice during our marriage, once from Denver to Colorado Springs when the boys were toddlers, and again within Colorado Springs when she got promoted to VP level. I thought we were a team working toward shared goals: financial security, raising good kids, building a stable family life. Lena seemed driven by external validation and professional achievement, while I was more focused on creating a warm home environment and being present for the boys' daily lives. I thought our different strengths complemented each other perfectly. The boys were typical 11-year-olds. Jake was more serious and studious, excelling in school but struggling socially at times. Tommy was the natural athlete and comedian, making friends easily but requiring more academic support. They both played hockey in a competitive local league, which consumed most of our weekends during the season. Lena and I had developed a good system of dividing parenting responsibilities based on our schedules and strengths. Or so I thought. About 2.5 years ago, things started changing in ways I initially dismissed as temporary stress. Lena became distant and distracted, constantly on her phone even during family meals, working late more frequently than ever before. She started attending networking events and team-building retreats that seemed to occur every other weekend. I chalked it up to work pressure. Her company was expanding rapidly into new markets, and she'd just gotten promoted to VP of Marketing with significantly increased responsibilities. The changes were subtle initially. Lena would come home from work and immediately disappear into our home office, claiming she had urgent emails to handle or client presentations to prepare. She'd emerge hours later, usually after the boys had finished homework and gone to bed, claiming exhaustion and wanting nothing more than a glass of wine and mindless television. Our evening conversations, which used to range from workplace gossip to weekend plans to detailed discussions about Jake's anxiety issues or Tommy's latest hockey achievements, became stilted one-word responses to my questions about her day. Lena started dressing differently too. She invested in expensive new clothes, tailored blazers, designer dresses, professional but sexy outfits that cost more than my monthly car payment. When I complimented her appearance, she'd brush off the praise, saying she needed to look the part in her new executive role. She began getting her hair and nails done weekly instead of monthly, joined an expensive gym downtown instead of using our neighborhood recreation center, and started wearing perfume daily instead of just for special occasions. The intimacy between us died slowly and painfully, like watching a plant wither despite your desperate attempts to revive it. Lena would come to bed after I'd already fallen asleep, or she'd stay up late working on her laptop in the living room, claiming she was too wired from work stress to sleep. When I tried to initiate physical affection or even basic conversation, she'd brush me off with, "I'm completely exhausted, Jacob," or, "Can we talk about this later when I'm not so overwhelmed?" Later never came. Our sex life became non-existent over the course of several months. Lena would claim headaches, stress, exhaustion from work demands, or simply turn away when I reached for her in bed. When I attempted to discuss our lack of physical intimacy, she'd become defensive and accusatory, saying I was being insensitive to her career pressures, that I only thought about my own needs without considering what she was dealing with professionally. The rejection hurt deeply, but the way she made me feel selfish and demanding for wanting physical connection with my own wife hurt even more. I remember one particular evening in October when Jake had scored his first goal in a competitive hockey game. I was bursting with excitement to share the news with Lena when she walked through the door around 8:30, later than usual, carrying herself with a strange energy I couldn't identify. She seemed almost glowing, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months, but also distracted and eager to end our conversation. When I started describing Jake's goal in detail, how he'd stolen the puck from the opposing team's defenseman, skated the length of the ice, and scored top shelf while the goalie was out of position, Lena was simultaneously scrolling through her phone, offering distracted ahas and "that's wonderful honey" responses without once looking up from her screen. Jake, who had been bouncing around the kit can waiting to tell his mother about his achievement, deflated completely when he realized she wasn't actually listening. He went upstairs without another word. That night, after the boys were asleep, I confronted Lena about her behavior. "Jake scored his first goal today, Lena. This was a huge moment for him, and you couldn't put down your phone long enough to celebrate with your son." She slammed her phone down on the kit can counter and glared at me with an intensity that shocked me. "I'm working my ass off to provide for this family, Jacob. I'm competing with men who don't have children to worry about, who can work 18-hour days without feeling guilty about missing bedtime stories. I have to prove myself every single day in ways you'll never understand." "I understand work pressure," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "But the boys need their mother present in their lives, not just physically here but emotionally engaged with what matters to them. Everything I do is for them," she shouted, loud enough that I worried she'd wake Jake and Tommy. "I'm building financial security for their college educations, for our retirement, for unexpected medical expenses or job losses. I'm thinking about their long-term future while you're worried about one stupid hockey goal." The conversation devolved into our worst fight in years. Lena accused me of being jealous of her professional success, of trying to hold her back because I was threatened by her income exceeding mine. I accused her of using work as an excuse to avoid our family and our marriage. We both said things designed to hurt each other, things that couldn't be taken back once spoken. That night, Lena slept in the guest room for the first time in our marriage. It became a regular occurrence over the following months. I started questioning everything about myself and our relationship. Was I being unreasonably needy? Was I failing to support Lena's career advancement properly? Should I be grateful that she was securing our family's financial future even if it meant sacrificing quality time together? Maybe I was old-fashioned or sexist for wanting my wife to prioritize family dinners and hockey games over networking events and business trips. The most painful aspect was how Lena seemed to reserve her worst behavior specifically for me. When work colleagues called during family time, her voice would become animated and warm. She'd laugh genuinely at their jokes, engage enthusiastically in discussions about marketing strategies or client relationships. The contrast with how she spoke to me, flat, irritated, dismissive, was stark and heartbreaking. Our boys began asking questions I didn't know how to answer. "Why is mommy always mad?" Tommy asked one morning while Lena was upstairs getting ready for another business trip. "Did we do something wrong?" Jake, more perceptive and articulate than his brother, was more direct. "Mom doesn't like being here anymore, does she, Dad? She always seems happier when she's leaving for work than when she's coming home." I made excuses constantly, telling the boys their mother was working hard for our family's future, that her job was very demanding and stressful, that she loved them more than anything despite seeming distracted. I covered for Lena's absence at school events, hockey games, and family gatherings, explaining to teachers, coaches, and relatives that she was dealing with important work responsibilities. My own parents began commenting on Lena's behavior during family visits. "She seems so distant," my mother observed after Lena spent an entire Sunday afternoon responding to work emails instead of playing with the boys in the backyard. "Is everything all right between you two?" I deflected these concerns, defending Lena's dedication to her career, but privately I was becoming increasingly worried about our marriage. We felt more like polite strangers sharing a house than partners building a life together. The breaking point came during Tommy's 11th birthday party in November. Lena had promised to help with decorations and be home early to greet arriving guests. Instead, she texted me an hour before the party started, "Stuck in crucial client meeting. Start without me. We'll try to make it home for cake." I had to explain to a house full of parents and excited children why Tommy's mother wasn't present for his birthday celebration. Tommy tried to hide his disappointment, but I could see the hurt in his eyes when he kept glancing toward the door, hoping Lena would appear. She finally arrived during cake time, rushed and flustered, still taking work calls in our kit can while I managed the party logistics alone. She missed Tommy blowing out his candles because she was arguing with someone about quarterly budget projections in the next room. The image of Tommy's face, confused and sad that his mother was physically present but emotionally absent during his special moment, is burned into my memory. After the guests left and the boys were in bed, I told Lena we needed to have a serious conversation about priorities and family commitments. "I can't keep making excuses for your absence in our children's lives," I said, attempting to keep my voice level despite the anger and hurt I was feeling. "Jake and Tommy are starting to believe you don't care about them." "That's ridiculous," she replied without looking up from her laptop, where she was reviewing presentation slides for the following day. "I'm doing this for them. Everything I do is to secure their future. They don't need financial security at the expense of having their mother emotionally present for important moments. They need you to show up, Lena. Actually show up." She slammed her laptop shut and faced me with barely controlled fury. "You have no idea what it's like to be the primary breadwinner in this family, Jacob. You have your comfortable little financial advisor position with regular 9 to 5 hours and predictable suburban clients. I'm competing in a cutthroat industry with people who will sacrifice anything for advancement. I can't afford to be seen as someone who prioritizes family over professional commitments. So our marriage and children are professional liabilities now? Don't twist my words," she snapped. "I'm trying to build something significant, something that will benefit all of us long term. I need you to support me instead of constantly criticizing my choices." The argument escalated into mutual accusations and recriminations. Lena claimed I was jealous of her success and trying to sabotage her career advancement. I accused her of abandoning our family emotionally while hiding behind professional ambitions. We both said cruel things designed to inflict maximum damage. That night established a pattern that continued for months. Lena sleeping in the guest room, maintaining emotional distance, treating home like a hotel where she occasionally stayed between business obligations. The real wake-up call came during Lena's company Christmas party in December, held at the elegant Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs. I was genuinely excited about the evening. We hadn't dressed up and attended a social function together in months, and I hoped spending time with Lena's colleagues might help me understand the work pressures she claimed were consuming her life. I bought a new suit for the occasion and made dinner reservations at the hotel restaurant before the party. Lena seemed pleased with my efforts, even commenting that I looked handsome when we were getting ready. For a brief moment, it felt like we might be reconnecting as a couple. However, once we arrived at the party, Lena's behavior became strange and concerning. Instead of introducing me to colleagues I hadn't met or including me in conversations about work projects, she spent the entire evening glued to her phone, texting someone with an intensity that seemed inappropriate for a social event. When colleagues approached to make conversation, she'd offer distracted responses while continuing to type messages. At one point, I caught a glimpse of her phone screen over her shoulder and saw she was texting someone named Derek, a name that didn't ring any bells from the work stories she occasionally shared at home. The messages I could partially see seemed casual and personal rather than professional. "Who's Derek?" I asked when she paused her texting to take a sip of wine. Lena's reaction was immediate and disproportionately angry. "It's none of your business, Jacob. I'm handling a work crisis that requires immediate attention." She actually turned her body away from me to continue texting, making it clear that I was being dismissed. "At your company Christmas party? What kind of work crisis happens during a social event?" "The kind that happens when you're responsible for major client relationships and million-dollar accounts," she replied without looking at me. "Not everything revolves around your schedule or your need for my attention." I spent the rest of the evening feeling like an unwelcome guest at my own wife's work event. Lena barely spoke to me, introduced me to no one, and seemed eager to end conversations whenever colleagues asked about our family or our life together. When the party ended, she continued texting Derek during our drive home, ignoring my attempts at conversation about the evening. That night in our hotel room, I'd planned for us to make a romantic evening of it, our first overnight away from the boys in months. Lena took an extended shower while leaving her phone on the nightstand. The temptation to look at her messages was overwhelming. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperation and suspicion drove me to attempt something I'd never done before. I tried to check her phone, but it was locked with a passcode I didn't recognize. Lena had never hidden her phone from me previously. We'd always known each other's passwords, shared devices casually, maintained the open access that comes with trusting your spouse completely. The fact that she'd changed her passcode without telling me felt like a fundamental violation of our marital trust. When Lena emerged from the bathroom in her silk nightgown, looking more beautiful than she had in months, I asked about the new passcode with false casualness. "Why do you need to get into my phone?" she demanded, her voice immediately defensive and hostile. Are you checking up on me now? Do you not trust me? I've never not trusted you, I replied, confused by her aggressive response. I was just wondering why you changed the code without mentioning it. What followed was our most devastating fight in 12 years of marriage. Lena accused me of being controlling and paranoid, of violating her privacy and treating her like she was under surveillance. She claimed I was being possessive and insecure, that my questions about Derek and her phone usage revealed deep-seated trust issues that were my problem to resolve. I can't believe you'd try to go through my personal messages, she said, pacing around the hotel room in agitation. What kind of marriage is this if you think I'm lying to you about work communications? I don't think you're lying, I said, though doubt was creeping into my voice. I just don't understand why texting with Derek required such secrecy and intensity during your own company party. Derek Madison is a senior account manager at a competing firm, she explained with exaggerated patience, as if I were a child who needed basic concepts explained slowly. We sometimes collaborate on industry initiatives and share market intelligence. Tonight he was dealing with a client crisis and needed my input on potential solutions. Her explanation sounded plausible, but something about her delivery felt rehearsed and overly detailed. In my experience, people telling the truth don't usually provide that much specific information unless directly asked. Lena slept on the hotel room couch that night, claiming she was too upset about my violation of trust to share the bed. We drove home in complete silence the next morning, and the emotional distance between us became a chasm that would only widen over the following months. Here's where the story takes an interesting turn that I never could have anticipated. About a month after the disastrous Christmas party, I was at Jake's hockey practice at the World Arena when I struck up a conversation with another parent I'd never met before. Her name was Sarah Ken, and her daughter Lucy had recently joined the team after moving to Colorado Springs from Seattle. Sarah was noticeably different from Lena in every conceivable way. Where Lena was tall and sharp-featured with an intensity that could cut glass, Sarah was petite with kind, expressive brown eyes and a warm laugh that made everyone around her smile. She wore her black hair in a simple ponytail, usually had on medical scrubs from coming straight from her shift at Children's Hospital, and somehow managed to look put together despite clearly being exhausted from pulling 12-hour shifts in pediatric intensive care. What struck me most about Sarah was her authenticity. She asked about my day and actually listened to my responses, maintaining eye contact and asking follow-up questions that showed genuine interest. When I mentioned Jake was struggling with algebra, she remembered to ask about his progress the following week. When Tommy complained about his hockey skates causing blisters, she recommended a local sports store that specialized in proper equipment fitting and even offered to take both boys there if I couldn't get away from work. Over several conversations, I learned that Sarah's divorce had been finalized just 8 months before their move to Colorado. Her ex-husband David, a successful software engineer, had developed a gambling addiction that he'd hidden from her for years. Sarah discovered the extent of the financial devastation when their mortgage payment bounced and she received foreclosure notices in the mail. David had lost their entire savings, including Lucy's college fund, through online poker and sports betting. The house they'd lived in for 6 years was sold at a loss to prevent complete foreclosure. I wanted Lucy to have a fresh start somewhere she wouldn't be known as the kid whose dad lost the house, Sarah explained during one of our coffee conversations after practice. She'd already endured enough embarrassment and social awkwardness. 9-year-old girls can be cruel when they sense vulnerability. Sarah had rebuilt their lives through sheer determination and careful planning. She'd researched cities with strong job markets for pediatric nurses, good school districts, and reasonable costs of living. Colorado Springs checked all her boxes, and she'd secured her hospital position before they even moved. They lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment near Lucy's school, drove a reliable used Honda Civic, and budgeted carefully for extras like hockey registration and equipment. "I'm not bitter about the divorce," she told me one evening as we watched our kids practice passing drills. "David's addiction was a disease that consumed him gradually. I'm angry about the lying and the financial deception, but I don't hate him as a person. I just couldn't enable his destructive behavior any longer." We started talking regularly at practices and games, conversations that felt effortless and natural. Sarah never offered unsolicited advice about my obvious marital struggles, but when I mentioned feeling overwhelmed trying to balance work responsibilities with being emotionally present for the boys while Lena was constantly absent, she simply said, "You're doing better than you think, Jacob. Jake and Tommy are clearly loved and well cared for. That's not something you can fake." Her words meant more to me than she could have realized. I'd been doubting my parenting abilities, wondering if I was failing my sons by not providing the two-parent stability they deserved. Sarah's observation that the boys seemed happy and secure despite our family turmoil was exactly the reassurance I needed. The first time Sarah really stepped in to help was during a particularly aggressive hockey game in February when Tommy was checked illegally into the boards by an opposing player who was clearly too big and too old for our league. I heard the sickening crack of Tommy's forearm breaking from my seat in the stands, followed by his screams of pain that cut through all the arena noise. While other parents were shouting at referees about missed penalties and dangerous play, Sarah was already making her way down to rink level. By the time I reached Tommy, who was lying on the ice crying and holding his arm at an obviously wrong angle, Sarah was kneeling beside him in her work clothes. "Hey buddy, I know this hurts terribly," she said in the calm, professional voice I'd later recognize as her pediatric nurse mode. "You're being incredibly brave. I'm a nurse who works with kids, and I think we need to take a trip to see some doctor friends of mine, okay?" She coordinated with the team coach to carefully move Tommy off the ice without aggravating his injury, called ahead to the emergency department at her hospital to expedite our arrival, and rode with us in my car while keeping Tommy distracted with stories about funny incidents from her work and teaching him breathing techniques to manage the pain. During the 20-minute drive to the hospital, I tried calling Lena 3 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. Sarah noticed my increasing frustration and simply said, "Let's focus on getting Tommy the care he needs right now. Everything else can wait until he's comfortable." At the hospital, Sarah's presence made everything smoother and less frightening for Tommy. She knew the emergency department staff personally, helped expedite the paperwork process, and stayed with Tommy during his x-rays when hospital policy prevented me from being in the room. She explained everything in terms an 11-year-old could understand: why they needed pictures of his bones, what the casting process would involve, how long he'd need to wear protection. Lena finally called back 3 hours later, claiming she'd been in important meetings and hadn't noticed her phone ringing. Her response when I explained Tommy's injury was telling. "How bad is it? Will he need surgery?" This couldn't have happened at a worse time. I have the Madison presentation tomorrow morning. When I mentioned that Sarah had helped us through the entire process, Lena's reaction was immediate and negative. Who exactly is Sarah? Why was some stranger making medical decisions about our son? That response revealed everything about Lena's priorities and her complete disconnection from our daily lives. She didn't even know who Sarah was, despite Sarah and Lucy being part of our hockey community for months. She was more concerned about her work presentation than her son's broken arm. Tommy's 6-week recovery period became an unexpected bonding experience with Sarah and Lucy. Since Tommy couldn't participate in hockey, Sarah suggested that Lucy teach him card games and board games she'd learned during her own recovery from appendix surgery the previous year. What started as a way to keep Tommy entertained evolved into weekly game nights alternating between my house and Sarah's apartment. These Tuesday evening gatherings became the highlight of my week. Sarah's apartment was warm and inviting despite being modestly furnished, filled with Lucy's artwork, photos from their cross-country move, and books scattered everywhere. Sarah would prepare homemade meals, pizza from scratch, hearty soups, comfort food that actually provided comfort, and we'd spend hours playing board games, working on jigsaw puzzles, or watching family-friendly movies. The contrast with my home environment became increasingly stark. At Sarah's place, conversation flowed naturally and easily. We discussed books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, funny stories from our childhoods, our fears and hopes regarding parenting. Sarah listened when I talked, asked thoughtful follow-up questions, and shared her own experiences without competing or trying to one-up me. At home, Lena continued to be distant, distracted, and increasingly irritable. She'd arrive from her mysterious work events tired and short-tempered, snapping at Jake and Tommy for normal childhood behaviors like leaving shoes by the front door or talking too loudly during television programs. She'd retreat immediately to her home office after dinner, emerging only to grab wine before disappearing again behind her closed door. I began looking forward to Tuesday game nights more than I looked forward to weekends with my own family. That realization was both liberating and terrifying. It forced me to acknowledge how emotionally starved I'd become for genuine human connection and authentic conversation. Fast forward to April of last year. Lena announced another business trip, this one to San Francisco for what she described as a strategic planning retreat, with senior leadership from her company. She'd be gone for 4 days, Thursday through Sunday, staying at the Marriott downtown and participating in intensive planning sessions for the upcoming fiscal year. The boys were actually excited about having a long weekend with just me. We'd been walking on eggshells around Lena's unpredictable moods for months, and her absence meant we could relax and be ourselves. I planned activities I knew they'd enjoy, hiking in Garden of the Gods, a Denver Nuggets game, pizza and movie nights without worrying about Lena's disapproval of our food choices or entertainment preferences. On Saturday morning, I was doing laundry in our basement when I found a business card in the pocket of Lena's jeans. Derek Madison, Senior Account Manager, Technova Solutions, a competing firm in the same industry as Lena's company. On the back, written in masculine handwriting that wasn't Lena's, Room 412, can't wait to see you again. Thursday was incredible. D. My hands started trembling as I read those words repeatedly, my brain struggling to process their implications. The business card felt like a smoking gun, physical evidence of what my subconscious mind had been trying to tell me for months. All the pieces suddenly clicked into place like a horrific jigsaw puzzle. The late nights, the weekend work trips, the secrecy around her phone, the emotional distance, the way she'd been dressing differently and investing in expensive clothes and beauty treatments. Thursday had been 3 days ago, the day Lena claimed to be in back-to-back client meetings and couldn't take my call when Jake's school nurse had contacted me about his stomach flu. She'd been completely unreachable from noon until evening, which I'd attributed to her demanding work schedule. I sat on our bedroom floor holding that business card for what felt like hours, my mind racing through every business trip and networking event she'd attended in recent months. Every time she'd come home glowing and relaxed in ways I hadn't seen since our early marriage, every excuse she'd made for being unreachable during family emergencies. The boys were spending the day with friends, giving me space to process this discovery without having to maintain a facade of normalcy. My first instinct was to call Lena immediately and demand explanations, but something held me back. If she could lie this elaborately for this long, she'd certainly have explanations prepared for getting caught. Instead, I called the Marriott in San Francisco where Lena claimed to be staying for her company retreat. After being transferred between departments, I finally reached someone who could confirm guest registrations and corporate events. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have anyone by that name registered currently, and we don't have any corporate retreat events scheduled this weekend," the desk clerk informed me politely. My stomach dropped as the last shred of doubt disappeared. The strategic planning retreat was complete fiction, just like God knows how many other business trips had been elaborate cover stories for her affair with Derek Madison. I spent the rest of Saturday in emotional turmoil, mechanically going through normal parenting routines when the boys returned home while internally feeling like my entire world was disintegrating. We ordered pizza for dinner, Jake and Tommy chattered about their day with friends, and I helped with weekend homework assignments, all while feeling like I was watching someone else live my life. That evening, after the boys were asleep, I did something I never imagined I'd be capable of. I researched private investigators online. The idea of hiring someone to document my wife's infidelity felt sordid and desperate, but I needed concrete, undeniable evidence. Lena was intelligent and manipulative. If I confronted her with only the business card, she'd find explanations that would make me question my own perceptions. I settled on Integrity Investigations, a firm run by Janet Reeves, a former police detective with 20 years of experience in domestic investigations. Her website was professional and discreet, featuring testimonials from clients who discovered spousal infidelity and needed documentation for divorce proceedings. I sent an email that night explaining my situation and requesting information about their services. Janet called me first thing Monday morning, her voice professionally kind but straightforward. "I understand how difficult this decision is, Mr. Thompson," she said. "Most of our clients struggle with hiring an investigator because it feels like a violation of trust. But you also deserve to know the truth about your marriage so you can make informed decisions about your future." She quoted fees that made me wince but weren't unreasonable considering what was at stake: my marriage, my children's stability, my financial security, my emotional well-being. "I can typically provide preliminary findings within 48 hours if your wife is currently active in this relationship. In cases of ongoing affairs, evidence usually presents itself quickly once we know what patterns to document." I hired Janet that morning, providing Lena's work schedule, vehicle information, and typical behavior patterns. She explained they'd focus on documenting Lena's activities during claimed work events, using surveillance photography and digital investigation techniques to establish the scope and duration of her relationship with Derek Madison. Meanwhile, I had to continue acting normally when Lena returned from her fabricated San Francisco trip. She arrived Sunday evening with expensive gifts for the boys, designer t-shirts and tech gadgets she claimed came from conference vendors, and elaborate stories about the business sessions she'd allegedly attended. She even showed me photos on her phone of San Francisco landmarks, which could have been taken during any tourist visit or downloaded from the internet. The lying was so smooth and practiced that I realized this level of deception required significant experience. Lena wasn't nervous or guilty, She seemed genuinely pleased with herself for managing her double life successfully. This clearly wasn't her first affair or her first time crafting detailed cover stories for extramarital activities. Tuesday evening, during our usual game night at Sarah's apartment, I must have seemed distracted and upset because Sarah asked if everything was okay. Lucy and Tommy were building an elaborate Lego city together while Jake read quietly on Sarah's couch, giving us a moment of adult conversation. Just work pressure, I lied, not ready to burden Sarah with my marital crisis. But she looked at me with those perceptive brown eyes and said gently, "You know I'm here if you need to talk, right?" Sometimes it helps to voice problems out loud, even when there's no immediate solution available. Her genuine concern and offer of support nearly broke my composure entirely. The contrast between Sarah's authentic care for my well-being and Lena's calculated deceptions was devastating. Here was a woman who'd known me for only a few months offering real emotional support, while my wife of 12 years was maintaining an elaborate secret life that excluded me completely. Wednesday afternoon, Janet called with preliminary findings that confirmed my worst fears while providing the concrete evidence I'd requested. "Mr. Thompson, I have difficult news to share," she said professionally. "Your wife has been meeting regularly with Derek Madison for approximately 8 to 10 months, possibly longer. They maintain a standing weekly reservation at the Marriott downtown every Thursday afternoon, and they've taken multiple weekend trips together over the past 6 months, including to Aspen, Las Vegas, Scottsdale, and most recently to Napa Valley." She emailed me a selection of surveillance photographs that documented Lena's betrayal beyond any possible denial. Images of Lena and Derek walking hand in hand into various hotels, embracing passionately in restaurant parking lots, sharing intimate dinners at expensive establishments I'd never heard of, behaving like an established couple comfortable with their relationship routines. Based on the evidence we've gathered, I can tell you this is a serious, committed emotional and physical relationship, not a casual workplace flirtation, Janet continued. They appear completely comfortable together, familiar with each other's preferences and routines. This has all the characteristics of a long-term committed affair. The photographs were time-stamped and dated, showing a consistent pattern extending back at least 8 months. The most recent images were from Lena's Denver client presentation the previous month. She and Derek had actually spent a romantic weekend at a mountain resort, skiing and dining and sharing a hotel room like any other vacationing couple. I requested the complete investigative report and all available photographic evidence. Janet warned me that some material might be emotionally difficult to view, but I needed to understand the full scope of Lena's betrayal before deciding how to proceed with confronting her or consulting divorce attorneys. That night, I barely slept despite Lena lying beside me, probably dreaming about Derek while I stared at the ceiling wondering how long I'd been living this complete charade. How many work emergencies had actually been romantic meetings? How many times had she returned home from being intimate with Derek and kissed me goodnight, acting like the devoted wife and mother? The next morning, Lena casually announced another business trip, client presentation, in Denver the following week that would require 3 days out of town. The effortless way she delivered this news while buttering toast and checking her phone made me feel physically sick. I nodded and made appropriate responses about managing the boys' schedules, playing my assigned role in her elaborate performance. I immediately called Janet and requested surveillance documentation of this Denver trip as well. "I want absolutely irrefutable evidence before I confront her," I explained. "She's going to deny everything initially, and I need to be completely prepared for that response." I spent the following week planning my approach carefully. Lena was intelligent, manipulative, and had been maintaining elaborate deceptions for months. If I handled the confrontation poorly, she'd find ways to turn the situation around, make me the villain, or use my emotional state against me in potential divorce proceedings. My brother Mike flew out from Phoenix that weekend to provide moral support and help me organize my thoughts. We spent hours in my garage with a cooler of beer, examining the investigative photographs like detectives reviewing evidence, while Jake and Tommy played video games inside, completely unaware that their family was disintegrating around them. "Jesus Christ, Jacob," Mike said, studying a photograph of Lena and Derek kissing outside an upscale wine bar downtown. "How long do you think this has really been going on?" Janet thinks at least 8 months based on credit card analysis and surveillance patterns, but I suspect it's been much longer. The personality changes, the emotional distance, the constant criticism of everything I did, it all started about 2 years ago. Mike had experienced his own divorce 5 years earlier when his wife Rebecca had an emotional affair with her personal trainer that eventually became physical. His advice was invaluable. Document everything meticulously, consult with divorce attorneys before making any confrontational moves, and prepare emotionally for Lena to become vindictive once she realized she'd been caught. "She's going to try to rewrite your entire marriage history," he warned me. "Suddenly you'll have been a terrible husband for years. She'll have been desperately unhappy and Derek rescued her from her misery. Your marriage was essentially over anyway. Don't let her control that narrative." I made appointments with 2 different divorce attorneys for the following Monday and Tuesday. I needed to understand my legal rights regarding child custody and asset division, and I wanted to know how to protect myself during what would likely become a contentious process. The first attorney, Robert Klein, was aggressively confrontational, immediately suggesting we pursue maximum financial penalties against Lena and fight for full custody based on her moral unfitness as a mother. His approach made me uncomfortable. Despite Lena's betrayal, she was still my children's mother, and I wasn't interested in destroying her vindicatively. The second attorney, Maria Santos, was more thoughtful and strategic. "Our primary goal should be protecting your interests and your relationship with your children while minimizing unnecessary damage," she advised. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, so adultery won't directly impact property division, but Lena's pattern of deception and absence from family responsibilities could be relevant for custody considerations. I hired Maria immediately and began systematically gathering financial records, documenting Lena's frequent absences from school events and hockey games, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Maria advised waiting until I had overwhelming evidence that Lena couldn't possibly deny or rationalize away. Meanwhile, maintaining the facade of normalcy at home became increasingly difficult. Lena was actually in an unusually good mood after returning from her latest romantic getaway with Derek, more affectionate and attentive than she'd been in months. She brought me coffee in bed, asked detailed questions about my work projects, even initiated physical intimacy for the first time since Tommy's birthday party. The sex was emotionally devastating, not because it was physically unsatisfying, but because Lena was clearly thinking about Derek throughout our encounter. She was more passionate and experimental than she'd been with me in years, trying positions and techniques she'd previously shown no interest in exploring. I realized she was probably replicating sexual experiences she'd had with Derek just days earlier, and I felt sick afterward. The most challenging aspect was maintaining normal behavior around Jake and Tommy while my world was crumbling internally. Jake, always perceptive about family dynamics, kept asking if I was feeling well, whether something was wrong at work, why I seemed distracted during our conversations. Tommy, more focused on immediate concerns, was primarily excited that Lena's improved mood might mean she'd start attending his hockey games again. Fortunately, Sarah continued offering practical support without knowing the real reason I seemed stressed and overwhelmed. She helped with carpooling when I had late client meetings, invited us for dinner when I seemed too exhausted to cook, and provided the kind of steady friendship that kept me grounded during emotional chaos. 2 weeks after receiving Janet's complete investigative report, Lena announced another business trip, returning to San Francisco for follow-up client meetings that would require 3 days out of town. The casual repetition of her previous cover story seemed either careless or arrogant. Derek was probably based in San Francisco, making it convenient for continuing their affair. I decided this would be my final opportunity to gather evidence before confronting Lena directly. I told her I'd planned a surprise for her return, dinner at Romano's Italian restaurant, the same place where we'd had our first date 13 years earlier. I framed it as wanting to reconnect as a couple, to make more effort in our relationship despite recent distance and tension. Lena seemed genuinely touched by the romantic gesture, which simultaneously made me feel guilty and furious. She was moved that her husband of 12 years wanted to have an intimate dinner together, while she was actively planning to spend the weekend having sex with another man. "That sounds absolutely perfect, Jacob," she said, kissing my forehead while I loaded the dishwasher after dinner. "I know I've been completely focused on work lately, and I realize I've been neglecting us as a couple. Maybe this dinner is exactly what our marriage needs." The irony was suffocating. Lena was acknowledging her emotional absence and promising to prioritize our relationship, while simultaneously planning her next infidelity. The casual cruelty of maintaining such elaborate deceptions was breathtaking. What Lena didn't realize was that I'd already made dinner reservations for Friday night and contracted Janet to document this San Francisco trip with comprehensive surveillance. I wanted recent, undeniable photographic evidence that would make denial impossible. Lena returned from her fabricated San Francisco business trip on Thursday evening, practically glowing with post-romantic satisfaction. She seemed relaxed and energetic in ways I hadn't witnessed in months, clearly coming down from an emotional and physical high that definitely wasn't from conducting client meetings. She'd brought expensive gifts for Jake and Tommy, designer hoodies and electronic gadgets she claimed were promotional items from her company's trade show booth. She also had detailed stories about conference presentations she'd allegedly attended, complete with business cards from vendors and photos of San Francisco landmarks that could have been taken during any tourist visit. Friday evening arrived with Lena dressed beautifully for our romantic reconnection dinner at Romano's. She'd bought a new dress specifically for the occasion, elegant black silk that flattered her figure perfectly, and had spent extra time on hair and makeup. For a moment, looking at her across our candlelit table, I could almost remember why I'd fallen in love with her years earlier. We ordered wine and appetizers, made small talk about work and the boys' upcoming hockey tournament, and Lena seemed to be making genuine effort to engage with me emotionally. She asked about my recent client meetings, shared amusing stories about her colleagues, even reached across the table to hold my hand while we waited for our entrees. "I know I've been distant lately," she said, her thumb stroking my knuckles in a gesture that once would have melted my heart. "Work has been overwhelming, but that's no excuse for neglecting you and our marriage. I want us to get back to being the team we used to be." The timing felt perfect. Lena was relaxed, seemingly open to honest conversation, and we were in a public setting that would prevent dramatic outbursts. I reached into my jacket pocket and withdrew the manila envelope I'd prepared. "Before we order dinner, Lena, I have something important to show you," I said, sliding the envelope across the table with hands that trembled slightly despite my attempts to remain calm. She opened it curiously, and I watched her facial expression change as she processed what she was seeing. The photographs were arranged chronologically, Lena and Derek walking hand in hand into various hotels, embracing passionately in restaurant parking lots, sharing intimate dinners at expensive establishments, behaving like an established couple on romantic vacations. The most recent images were from her San Francisco business trip that had ended just 24 hours earlier, she and Derek at wine tastings in Napa Valley, hiking together through redwood forests, sharing passionate kisses on scenic overlooks, entering and leaving the same hotel room. Color drained from Lena's face as she flipped through photograph after photograph documenting her 8-month affair. Her hands began shaking, and she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before, genuine shock mixed with a dawning realization that her carefully constructed deceptions had been completely exposed. "Jacob, I can explain this," she began, but her voice lacked conviction. "No need for explanations," I interrupted, keeping my voice level despite the emotions churning inside me. "I've filed for divorce. You'll be served with papers on Monday morning. I wanted you to know tonight, away from Jake and Tommy, so you could prepare yourself." Lena's reaction surprised me completely. Instead of denying the affair or becoming defensive about being caught, she sat quietly staring at the photographs for several minutes. Finally, she looked up and met my eyes directly. "I'm not sorry the affair happened, Jacob. I'm only sorry you found out this way, and I'm sorry for the pain this will cause the boys." Her brutal honesty was somehow both devastating and appreciated. After months of lies and gaslighting, Lena's direct acknowledgement of her choices felt like a strange relief. "How long has this really been going on?" I asked. "About 10 months, she admitted. "We met at an industry conference in Denver last summer. The connection was immediate and intense. Derek understood my ambitions and career pressures in ways you never could. We sat in that restaurant for another hour having the most honest conversation we'd had in years." Lena explained that she'd gradually fallen out of love with me and our suburban family life, but had been too cowardly to address our marital problems directly. Derek made her feel alive and appreciated in ways she'd forgotten were possible. "I've been planning to ask for a divorce after the boys finished this school year," she said. "I was trying to figure out how to minimize the disruption to their lives. By having an affair for 10 months instead of having an honest conversation with your husband?" Lena had no good answer for that question. We finished our wine in relative silence, both processing the end of our marriage and the beginning of whatever came next. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly civilized once Lena accepted that I had irrefutable evidence of her infidelity. She didn't contest my requests for 50-50 custody or try to hide assets, and she seemed genuinely remorseful about the deception even if she wasn't sorry about the affair itself. We told Jake and Tommy together the following weekend, sitting them down in our living room for the most difficult conversation of my parenting experience. We explained that sometimes adults grow apart and realize they're not compatible as married partners, but that doesn't change their love for their children in any way. "Are you getting divorced because of something we did?" Tommy asked, his 11-year-old mind trying to understand why his family was dissolving. "Absolutely not," Lena and I said simultaneously. This is about problems between mom and dad that have nothing to do with you boys. You are the best part of both our lives, and that will never change. Jake, more perceptive than his brother, asked the harder question. Will we still live in this house? Will we still see both of you regularly? We assured them that they'd continue living in their childhood home with me, while spending alternate weekends and Wednesday evenings with Lena in her new apartment. We promised that holidays and special events would be shared experiences, and that we'd both continue attending their hockey games and school activities. The boys handled the news better than I'd expected, though both went through periods of anger, sadness, and confusion over the following months. Jake initially blamed me for not trying harder to save the marriage, while Tommy was angry with Lena for breaking up our family. Family therapy helped them process these complicated emotions and understand that divorce was the healthiest option for everyone involved. Lena found a 2-bedroom apartment across town and furnished it specifically with the boys' comfort in mind. Gaming systems, comfortable beds, a refrigerator stocked with their favorite foods. She made genuine effort to be emotionally present during her custody time, perhaps recognizing that she'd been absent from their lives for too long. The most challenging aspect of single parenting was managing everything alone during my custody periods. That's when Sarah became invaluable in ways that went far beyond friendship. She helped with carpooling when I had evening client meetings, invited us for dinner when I was too exhausted to cook, and provided emotional support during my worst moments of self-doubt. About 6 months after my divorce was finalized, Sarah and I were sharing coffee at our usual spot after hockey practice when she seemed unusually nervous and distracted. The boys and Lucy were at a team pizza party that would run for 2 hours, giving us extended time for adult conversation without constant interruptions. Sarah stirred her latte obsessively, avoided eye contact, and seemed to be gathering courage for something significant. We'd been having these coffee meetings regularly since my divorce proceedings began, initially as mutual support between single parents, then because these conversations had become emotional lifelines for both of us. "Jacob," she finally said, setting down her spoon and looking directly at me with those expressive brown eyes, "I need to tell you something, and I'm terrified it's going to ruin our friendship completely." My heart rate accelerated immediately. After Lena's betrayal, I'd become hyper-vigilant about people having difficult conversations with me, automatically assuming worst-case scenarios in every situation. "Sarah, you can tell me anything," I replied, though anxiety was building in my chest. "After everything I've survived this year, I promise there's nothing you could say that would destroy our friendship." She took a deep breath like someone preparing to jump off a cliff. "I've developed romantic feelings for you, Jacob. Real, serious feelings. And I don't know what to do about them." I nearly choked on my coffee, not because the confession was unwelcome, but because I'd been having identical internal struggles for weeks without knowing how to address them appropriately. "Please let me finish before you respond," she continued, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I know this complicates everything we've built together. I know you're still processing your divorce and probably aren't ready for romantic relationships. I know it could make things awkward for all our children if this goes badly between us." She paused, gathering her thoughts before continuing. "But I also know that I've never connected with someone the way I connect with you. You're kind without being weak, funny without being mean-spirited, present with your children in ways that make me respect you as both a man and a father." When Lucy talks about Jake and Tommy's dad, there's genuine admiration in her voice. When your boys talk about you, it's clear they don't just love you, they actually like you as a person. I sat stunned, not because Sarah's feelings were unexpected, but because she'd articulated everything I'd been experiencing but was afraid to acknowledge. Over recent months, our friendship had evolved into something deeper than mutual support through difficult circumstances. I looked forward to our coffee conversations more than any other part of my week. I found myself thinking about things Sarah had said days after our meetings ended. When something amusing happened at work or the boys did something particularly adorable, Sarah was the person I wanted to share it with immediately. "Sarah," I said carefully, reaching across our small table to take her hand, "I've been having the exact same feelings, but I didn't want to complicate our friendship or make things uncomfortable for you and Lucy." Relief washed over her face immediately and profoundly. "Really? You're not just being polite because you feel sorry for me." I laughed genuinely for the first time in months. "I'm definitely not being polite. But I'm also terrified of messing this up." Lena's betrayal left me questioning my judgment about romantic relationships. What if I'm just transferring my need for emotional support onto the first woman who's been consistently kind to me? What if I'm rebounding without realizing it? Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I've worried about the same things from my perspective. What if I'm just grateful for positive male attention after David made me feel worthless for years? What if I'm looking for a father figure for Lucy and confusing that with genuine romantic attraction? We talked for 3 hours that afternoon, until the cafe was preparing to close and we realized we'd completely missed picking up our children from the pizza party. Jake had called my phone twice asking if they'd been forgotten, and Lucy had texted Sarah wondering where her mother was. We agreed to explore our feelings carefully and gradually. Sarah was adamant about not involving the children initially. They'd all experienced enough upheaval and uncertainty recently, and we needed to be absolutely certain about our own emotions before introducing another major change into their lives. If this doesn't work out between us romantically, I don't want Jake, Tommy, and Lucy to lose their friendships, Sarah said as we walked to our cars. Their relationships are separate from whatever happens between us adults, and that needs to remain our priority. Our first official date happened the following Saturday. We drove to Denver, an hour away, to see a movie and have dinner somewhere we wouldn't encounter other hockey parents or neighborhood acquaintances. The distance felt necessary. We needed space to explore this new dynamic without feeling like we were performing for an audience who knew us as just friends. The evening was both revelation and confirmation. Without the familiar context of hockey rinks and family emergencies, Sarah and I discovered we had even more compatibility than we'd realized. We both loved hiking but rarely had time for it as single parents. We'd both read the same obscure mystery novels and had passionate opinions about the endings. Sarah had studied abroad in Italy during college, while I'd backpacked through Europe after graduation. We spent an hour comparing stories about getting lost in Rome and eating incredible gelato. More importantly, the physical chemistry between us felt natural and comfortable rather than desperate or needy. When Sarah reached for my hand during the movie, it felt perfectly right. When I put my arm around her shoulders during dinner, she leaned into me without hesitation. Our goodnight kiss in her apartment parking lot was tender and sweet, full of promise rather than urgency. "I don't want to rush this," Sarah said as we sat in my car outside her building. "But I also don't want to overthink everything to death." "What does not rushing look like to you?" I asked, genuinely curious about her boundaries and expectations. Dating privately for a while before we involved the children beyond normal carpooling and team events. Taking time to figure out if this is real connection or if we're both just grateful for adult companionship. Being completely honest about our fears and concerns instead of pretending everything is perfect. I appreciated her thoughtfulness and willingness to have potentially awkward conversations up front. Lena had never been comfortable discussing relationship dynamics or emotional needs. She preferred assuming I should instinctively understand what she wanted, then getting frustrated when I inevitably failed to read her mind correctly. We dated quietly for 4 months, seeing each other once or twice weekly while maintaining our established friendship at hockey events. The secrecy felt strange but necessary. Lucy, Jake, and Tommy had endured enough upheaval in recent years, and we needed absolute certainty about our feelings before introducing another potential change. During this period, I learned more about Sarah's character than I'd learned about Lena's during 12 years of marriage. Sarah was patient with difficult parents at the hospital, advocating fiercely for young patients while remaining diplomatically professional. She volunteered at Lucy's school library every Tuesday evening, reading to kindergartners struggling with literacy. She sent birthday cards to elderly neighbors and shoveled their driveways during snowstorms without being asked. Most importantly, Sarah was consistent and reliable. She didn't have unpredictable mood swings or hidden agendas. When she promised to call, she called. When she made plans, she kept them. When she was having difficult days, she communicated directly instead of taking frustrations out on people around her. After months of Lena's unpredictable emotional climate, Sarah's steadiness felt like stepping into warm sunshine after enduring a harsh winter. The physical relationship between Sarah and me developed slowly and naturally over several months. Sarah never used intimacy as manipulation or withheld affection when she was upset about unrelated issues. After months of feeling unwanted and rejected in my marriage, being with someone who genuinely desired me was healing in ways I hadn't expected. Our first night together happened about 5 months into our relationship, when Lucy was staying overnight with friends and the boys were spending the weekend with Lena. Sarah prepared dinner at her apartment, homemade pasta with wine sauce that took 3 hours to prepare properly. We talked until nearly midnight, sharing stories about our childhoods, our fears regarding parenting, our hopes for the future. "I want you to understand something important," Sarah said as we cleaned dishes together in her small kit ken. "I'm not looking for someone to rescue me or solve my problems. I'm not trying to replace Lucy's father or find a financial provider for us. I have a stable job, a comfortable life, and we're doing fine independently. What are you looking for then? I asked, genuinely curious about her expectations. True partnership. Someone to share good experiences with, someone to help carry difficult burdens when they arise. Someone who makes me want to be the best version of myself, not because they're demanding it, but because they inspire it naturally. That night was tender and passionate simultaneously, two people choosing each other after considerable thought and caution. Sarah was giving and generous, focused on mutual pleasure rather than performance or competition. The contrast with my final months with Lena, obligatory sex, predictable positions, Lena checking her phone immediately before and after, was stark and emotionally healing. Afterward, as we lay talking in her bedroom, Sarah traced gentle patterns on my chest and said quietly, I haven't felt this connected to another person in years. Maybe ever. Even during your marriage? I asked. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. David and I were college sweethearts who grew into different people but stayed together from habit and comfort. We were adequate roommates and co-parents, but we were never genuine partners. There was never this feeling of being completely seen and appreciated for who I actually am. I understood exactly what she meant. Lena and I had been performing roles for years. Successful suburban couple, devoted parents, career-focused professionals advancing through life stages predictably. But underneath the performance, we'd lost sight of each other as individuals with separate needs, desires, and dreams. With Sarah, I felt authentically myself, the guy who still got excited about action movies, who sang off-key while driving, who worried constantly about being an adequate father. Sarah not only accepted these aspects of my personality, she seemed to find them endearing rather than irritating or embarrassing. Lena's relationship with Derek predictably imploded about 18 months after our divorce was finalized. Apparently, Derek was also married and had never intended to leave his wife despite his promises to Lena. She discovered she'd been his long-term affair partner while he maintained his primary relationship with his actual family. Lena was devastated when she realized she'd destroyed her marriage for someone who'd been using her for convenient sex and ego gratification. She tried reaching out to me several times, ostensibly wanting to discuss co-parenting strategies, but really fishing to see if I might be interested in reconciliation. When Lena discovered my relationship with Sarah, she became bitter and accusatory, claiming I'd moved on too quickly and wasn't considering the boy's emotional needs. The irony was breathtaking. The woman who'd conducted a 10-month affair while married was criticizing my timeline for dating after our divorce. Jake and Tommy occasionally returned from Lena's apartment with probing questions about whether Sarah and I were planning to marry, whether I still had feelings for their mother, and similar inquiries that clearly originated from Lena's fishing expeditions for information about my personal life. I had to have a firm conversation with Lena about keeping our children out of adult relationship drama. I reminded her that she'd made her choice when she decided to have an affair rather than addressing our marital problems honestly, and my personal life was no longer her concern as long as I remained a good father to our sons. The boys are adjusting well to our new family structure, I told her during a tense phone conversation. They like Sarah, they're happy when they're with me, and they seem comfortable with our custody arrangement. If you're having difficulty processing my relationship, that's something you need to work through independently or with a therapist. Lena's response was predictably manipulative. I just think it's confusing for Jake and Tommy to see you with another woman so soon after our divorce. They keep asking me if Sarah is going to become their new mother. What do you tell them when they ask that? I tell them that their real mother loves them and will always be their mother, and that Daddy is still figuring out his feelings. That conversation made me realize Lena was actively undermining my relationship with Sarah by creating anxiety and confusion for the boys. I had to address this directly with Jake and Tommy, reassuring them that Sarah was my girlfriend and a good friend to them, but she wasn't trying to replace their mother in any way. Sarah and I have been together for almost 2 years now, and we moved in together 8 months ago. Our house is wonderfully chaotic, a genuine blended family with Jake, Tommy, Lucy, and our adopted dog Max that we selected together from a local animal shelter. The boys have adapted remarkably well to our new family structure. Jake, who initially struggled more with his parents' divorce, has developed a close bond with Sarah and often seeks her advice about issues he doesn't want to discuss with Lena or me. Tommy loves having Lucy as his younger sister and enjoys being her protective big brother during school events and neighborhood activities. Lucy has flourished in our stable household environment. She's excelling academically, has made close friends in our neighborhood, and seems genuinely happy most of the time. Occasionally she mentions missing her father, but those moments are becoming less frequent as she settles into our family rhythm. We got engaged 3 months ago during a family camping trip to Rocky Mountain National Park. I'd been planning the proposal for weeks, and Jake, Tommy, and Lucy were all involved in the surprise. Sarah was more excited than I'd ever seen her, and the kids were practically bouncing off the walls with enthusiasm about the upcoming wedding. We're planning a small ceremony this October, just immediate family and close friends. Jake will walk Sarah down the aisle since her father passed away when she was in college. Tommy and Lucy will serve as ring bearers, and we'll exchange vows we've written ourselves about partnership, blended families, and second chances at love. Lena has begun dating someone new, a recently divorced accountant she met through online dating. The boys seem to like him well enough, though they've mentioned he's significantly different from me in terms of personality and interests. I'm genuinely happy for Lena if this relationship makes her feel fulfilled in ways our marriage couldn't. The custody arrangement continues working smoothly. Lena has the boys alternate weekends and Wednesday evenings, and we share holidays and special events without drama or conflict. She's made effort to be more emotionally present during her time with Jake and Tommy, perhaps recognizing how much her previous absence had affected them. Lena occasionally makes comments about the boys being confused by our blended family situation, but Jake and Tommy seem perfectly comfortable with having 2 homes, 2 sets of family rules, and additional people who care about their well-being. Children are remarkably adaptable when the adults in their lives behave maturely and prioritize their needs. Looking back on this entire experience, several important lessons have become clear. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong in your relationship. I knew Lena was emotionally absent and behaving strangely for months before I discovered concrete evidence of her affair. Don't let someone convince you that your perceptions are incorrect when your gut is telling you something is off. Don't settle for emotional scraps from your partner. I was so grateful for any attention or affection from Lena during our marriage's final years that I accepted far less than I deserved. Everyone deserves to be loved enthusiastically and consistently, not reluctantly or conditionally. Actions matter significantly more than words. Lena could claim she loved me while simultaneously conducting an elaborate affair for 10 months. Sarah doesn't just tell me she loves me, she demonstrates it through consistent, caring behavior every single day. Moving forward doesn't mean you failed. I spent considerable time wondering whether I could have saved my marriage through different choices or greater effort. The reality is that you can't rescue a marriage single-handedly when your spouse has already emotionally disengaged. Blended families can work beautifully with patience and communication. I worried extensively about introducing Sarah to the boys too quickly or creating complicated step-family dynamics. With genuine care for all children involved and consistent effort from adults, it's possible to create something wonderful. Healing takes time and self-reflection. I married young and thought I understood what healthy love looked like. Lena's betrayal forced me to examine my relationship patterns and figure out what I actually wanted in a life partner. Sarah entered my life when I was finally emotionally ready for authentic partnership. Lena is getting married to her accountant boyfriend next month, and Jake and Tommy will participate in the wedding ceremony. It feels surreal that my ex-wife is remarrying while I'm simultaneously planning my own wedding, but I'm genuinely happy for her if this person provides the fulfillment our marriage couldn't offer. Sometimes I wonder what might have happened if Lena had been honest about falling out of love instead of conducting a secret affair for months. We might have divorced more amicably and established better co-parenting relationships from the beginning. However, I also recognize that everything happened exactly as it needed to. Lena's betrayal led me to Sarah, and I found a love that's deeper and more authentic than anything I'd experienced previously. Sarah and I are planning our honeymoon for after the October wedding, a family trip to Disneyland with all 3 kids. It's not the life I originally planned or expected, but it's infinitely better than anything I could have imagined during those dark months when my marriage was disintegrating. To anyone currently experiencing spousal betrayal or considering divorce, recovery is possible, and happiness exists on the other side of this trauma. The betrayal feels devastating initially, but it doesn't have to define your future relationships or your capacity for love. Sometimes the worst experience of your life creates space for the best experience of your life. Thanks for reading my story, Reddit. Writing everything out has been therapeutic in unexpected ways. This community helped me realize I wasn't losing my mind during the worst period of my life, and that validation meant everything when I was questioning my own perceptions and sanity.